Hi everyone and welcome back. So in this video, we'll continue our analysis with Excel files using Python, and specifically we'll go into more formatting options using these libraries. We'll go through many types of styling, alignment, borders, fill colors, conditional formatting, and so on. And the idea for this video is we should be able to create production ready Excel sheets that we can directly send out to stakeholders, let's say through Python. You shouldn't need to manually intervene and do some sorts of formatting or other cleaning in the Excel sheets before you send it out. So as usual, we'll go through a lot of examples through which we can cover syntax so that we know that these kinds of things are possible using these libraries. And let's get started. So the first one, we'll look at some examples of OpenPyXL, and the first one is how to apply font styles. So let me add a code block here, and I'll import from OpenPyXL import workbook from OpenPyXL dot styles import font. Now we looked at one example of adding font in the last video. Let's look at some more. So let's say I am going to create one workbook. Perfect. Now let me add some data to it. Let me add A1 and this is bold. So I can just call A1 dot font and I can initialize this with font bold is equals to true. Perfect. So in the same way, I can also add, let's say, italics. So if I have to do italic text, I'll just change it to italic and italic equals true. Sounds good. Now if I have to do both, I can take, so I can't do A1, let me do A2, and I'll copy the same thing for A3. Bold italic font bold is equals to true, comma italic equals true. Now if I want to do something like an underline, I can also do the same. Let me add A4 and A4 is equals to underline. I'll say underline is equals to true. So these are some of the parameters that you can play with. Again, I'll encourage you to open this up, open this function when you're trying to determine or when you're trying to add different types of font. Just open this function up in documentation and see what are the keyword arguments that it can take and different types of format options that you have. Choose whichever one suits your needs, and I'll just save this notebook. I have saved this workbook as formatted texts. Let's just call it that, XLSX. Oh, my bad. Underline does not take a boolean. It'll take what kind of underline you want to add. Done. So let's go. I'm in this folder. I just executed and created this workbook. I'll download this one and I'll open it up. Perfect. So this is my workbook, and you can see that what I have here is bold italic, and underline text. So with this function, you can explore some basic formatting options on text, and you can apply font styles using a function called font. Now let's look at another example. In this example, we'll add alignment to our cells. So let's just add a code block here, and I'll use the same worksheet which I have in this workbook. So WS is still initialized, it's active. So I can just go and do WS B1, and I can do, let's say I want to do center align. I'll do that, and similar syntax, I can just call B1 dot alignment. I can call alignment attribute of the cell, and I can call the function alignment with the parameter horizontal is equals to center, let's say. So there are horizontal and vertical alignment options in this function, and you can align both of those, combination of those, or just one, depending on whatever you need. I'll just do this and I'll save this as a new notebook, formatted alignments dot xlsx. So again, alignment is not defined just because I've not imported this. Let's import alignment. Perfect. Now I should have another notebook. I have this notebook. I'll download this one, and let me just open this, and I'll drag the new one. Let me drag it here. So I have this initial worksheet that I was working with, And in the same one, I have another B1 value added here. So, and this is center aligned, and this is horizontally aligned, as we can see, because see, by default, the vertical alignment is towards the bottom of the cell, but horizontally it's aligned in the center. Okay. So this makes sense. And we can use different parameters on alignment to align in whichever way we want. Now let's see another example. Let's add border to it. So again, now I'll import border and side, and let me add border to it. So I'll define a thin border and I'll define it with border. So for all the sides, I can specify which kind of border I want, and I can customize each side of the border for the cell. In this case, I want to keep it uniform. So what I'll do is I'll initialize a thin border with left side style is thin, right side style is thin, top style thin, bottom style thin. So it's a thin border that I've initialized in this parameter. And then what I'll do is I want to, let's say, apply this border on a bunch of rows. So I can do an iteration on rows in WS C1 to C3, let's say. And in this particular iteration, these particular rows, what I want to do is for cell in row, cell dot border is equals to thin border. I'll run this. Perfect. Now let me just save this notebook as well. So I can use the same worksheet and use the same workbook and save it as a new one, formatted border dot xlsx. So we have another file. Let me download this one and open this one, and let's see. So this is my new file. And now if you see, what I have is C1 to C3. I have iterated on the rows, and for each of the cell from C1 to C3, it has a thin border applied to it. And I've defined this thin border using this function border, which I just imported from openpyxl.styles. So this openpyxl.styles contain all of these functions which are really helpful when we are trying to style our data. Perfect. So now applying fill colors. Let's move on to the next example where we apply fill colors to it. Now we saw an example of applying a fill color in the last video, but that was a solid fill. We saw that we chose a start color and applied that color to our cell, and it was a solid fill. Now let's see another example. I'll just use the same worksheet and I'll say worksheet and select the cell D2. Let's say I'll call it gradient fill. Let's put in some data in it, and now ws dot fill. So ws d2 dot fill is equals to pattern. So let me just import this function as well, pattern fill and pattern fill. Now I can define start color, and start color is equals to, let me just give some yellow highlight to it. So there we go. And I'll say end color is equals to, let's say, this one. And for the fill type, so let me just give a fill type as light down. There are many fill type values, and I'll close this and I'll save this workbook, wb.save formatted fill.xlsx. Perfect. Let's just see what we have here. I have a formatted fill, and I'll download this one and I'll open it. So this is the one that we have. Let's try some other value. Let's do this. Let me download it again. And this is what I have. So now let's move on to the part 2, which is working with XLSX. So XLSX writer, as we saw in the last video, is primarily for writing files, is not for opening and modifying existing files. So we'll just do some styling, and we can do all of those stylings that we did with OpenPyXL in XLSX as well. So we'll just look at some examples on how to bolden text, how to make it italic, how to make it centered, and how to do or fill it with colors. So we'll just start off with a simple XLSX import. So let me just import XLSX writer. Now I'll want to initialize a new workbook and I want to add a worksheet to it. So let me just do that. Now, how I can define bold and italic and all those types of text, I'll do this. Bold is equals to workbook dot add format. I'm initializing these variables called bold, italic, and let me just do that. I'll say bold is true, and in the same way I'll initialize some more variables. I'll say italic is equals to workbook dot add format. Italic is true, centered is add format, align is center, red fill is background color, bg underscore color is red, and bordered is add format, border is 1. So once I do that, I have defined these variables that I can further use in my particular cells of my worksheet. So let's just do that. Worksheet dot write. Now I'll write my data in the similar way that we introduced earlier. A1 is, let's say, bold, and along with this I'll give this parameter bold. I'll write more data. A2 is italic and I'll give the parameter italic. A3 is, let's say, I say centered and I'll give the parameter centered. Perfect. Now let's do A4 is red and I'll give the parameter red fill. And finally, I have A5. I'll define A5 with, let's not do A5 because there's a red cell above it. Let's do C1, and C1 is bordered, and I'll give the parameter border. Perfect. Now with this, let me just close my workbook dot close and I'll run this. Perfect. So I have a formatted XLSX writer. I'll download this one. I will open it and I'll just close these ones, the older ones. Don't save. Perfect. So I'll drag my XLSX one. Let's maximize this. So this is what we did. In the first one, we boldened some text. Second one, we made it italic. Third one is centered. So let's just drag. So this is centered. The fourth one has a fill color of red, and the fifth one, which is C1, is bordered with a pixel 1. And all of that could be achieved using XLSX as well. And the syntax is slightly different. So all you need to do is change the syntax a little bit, but you can essentially achieve all those things that we achieved with OpenPyXL using XLSX. So when you only have to write Excel files through some processing after pandas in Python, you can just use XLSX because it's going to be faster. But if you have to modify and open some subsequent Excel files in between, feel free to use OpenPyXL. These two are Excel specific libraries. If you're working with more data in pandas, you can just do an import with pandas read Excel and pandas to Excel. Perfect. So let's move on and see one more example. In this one, so this is the one in which we created styled Excel sheet. We'll finally look at the example where we can do conditional formatting with XLSX. So XLSX gives us capability to also add conditional formatting. So again, I can't use this notebook because this is already written. So I'll need to initialize a new notebook, and I'll do that, and let me just initialize a new notebook. So this is a workbook. I'm initializing a new workbook with this name, and I've added a worksheet in it. Now let me add some sample data. So what I'll do is, this is my sample data, and I'll add it in the column with A1 as column name, and this is the data. So I've added a column, and now I want to apply some conditional formatting. So I'll do worksheet dot conditional format. I'll select A1 to A10, and what I'll do is I'll define a type. So this is where we can give those options similar to what we had in Excel. Type, and my type is, let's just say, three color scale. Let me just give that. Okay. And I'll close the workbook dot close. That's it. So I've saved a new notebook. I've saved a new workbook, and I'll just download this. Let me just open this and I'll close the older ones. And this is my workbook. So if you see, what we have done is we took some data from this one. We took some data, we built out a column, and we initialize that A1 is the first data cell, and we built out this column from 10 to 100, and then we added a conditional formatting option from A1 to A10, and we gave this a type of 3 color scale. That's it. And we are able to use a more complex function, a complex feature of Excel directly through Python. And that's what I wanted to show in this video, that we can do a lot of advanced formatting in Excel without even opening an Excel workbook. We can just do it using Python with all these libraries. Now, I would encourage you to explore more such options. Just go to these libraries and see what are the different options or different types of stylings that are available in these libraries, and feel free to explore those, and I'll attach a lot of more examples in this workbook as well. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.